Hello to Maddie and Beckett. Let's take a look at the very interesting game that you played. And part of what made it interesting was that there was an attempt to apply something that was learned from a similar position to this one. And that's always a really good thing to do, to try to apply what you've learned to new situations. The only thing is you have to be careful and make sure that it really does apply. So that's part of the joy and challenge of chess, is that we can have lots of ideas, but we have to make sure that those ideas actually work in different situations. So let's jump in and you'll see what I mean very soon. So e4, e5, knight f3, and here Beckett plays the Petrov defense with knight f6. So the main move here is knight takes e5, but Maddie decides to head for probably what would be a four knights in most cases if black were to play knight to c6. But Beckett played bishop to c5, and while I like this active developing move, we got to make sure that we are paying attention to all of our opponent's ideas. And here, white can and should take on e5, and this would be a good move. If black plays queen to e7, then white can just play d4, defending the knight and attacking the black bishop. And after bishop to b4, I think simply f3, and white will, as far as I can tell, keep the extra pawn, and it's a very good extra pawn in the center. So after knight takes e5, I think black's best is to go bishop to d4, attacking the knight on e5, but also attacking the knight on c3, which defends the e-pawn. So we got this little chain, right? We can take that and then take this. But after knight f3, takes, knight e4, and then something like bishop to d3, white has a nice lead in development, not only because white is up a tempo already, but because this bishop is ready to go, while the black bishop on c8 is still locked in. So white's going to have like at least a two-move development advantage as the game goes, maybe even three moves. So that and the two bishops give white a nice plus, but at least material is equal here. So that's what Maddie should have played. Bishop to c4 is played instead, and now black should be about equal after either knight to c6 with this super symmetrical position, or with d6. Both moves are, I think, pretty much fine. I would prefer knight to c6, but they're both okay. But knight takes e4. So this is, I think, where Beckett got fooled by the similarity of this position to one where knight takes e4 is a great move. So that position looks like this, right? So we can see it's slightly different, but that slight difference makes a big difference. So the version where it's good is, let's say, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and now if white plays knight to c3, or we could have had it through this move order in the game, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, and now bishop to c4. So the same thing, we go knight takes e4 here. Knight takes e4, d5. The bishop's best move is to go back to d3, takes, and now white kind of threatens to take here and then take on e5, so bishop to d6 gives the pawn some extra protection and prepares to castle, and this position is equal. So here, in this situation, knight takes e4 is a very good move. So it looks similar, but there's a huge difference here, which is that after white takes the knight, so white's up a piece for a pawn right now, black makes the fork. The problem is the white knight can grab a second piece. So now white's up two pieces for the one pawn. And so yeah, black gets one of the pieces back, but not the other. And so now it's big trouble. So castles, queen d5, and here I want to really kind of highlight Maddie's excellent move here. So a lot of us would just say, hey, my knight's under attack, I should probably run away, maybe play knight to a4, and then bring the knight back to c3. And that's not a terrible idea, but Maddie found a better move, which was to say, yeah, that knight is under attack, but I've got a counterattack which is really good, rook to e1. So this is great. The threat is to play rook takes e5, which is exactly what white is going to play if black takes the knight, and that is in fact what happens. So queen takes knight, rook takes e5, takes, and white is up a queen for a rook and went on to win. What I would say two things about this position for black. So one is that the better move would have been to play f6, just defend the pawn, and the game goes on. I mean, now white will probably move the knight away. You could try d4, but then black castles, and white can't take because then the knight would hang. So sooner or later, probably the knight should retreat. But I liked rook to e1 first. The more general point I want to make is this. When you see your opponent ignoring a really obvious threat, right? So the queen on d5 I mean, there's no subtlety to this, right? The queen is just right next to the knight. And so you should think, my opponent should not miss a move like that. That's a pretty obvious threat. So if they play something that seems to ignore the threat, you should be super suspicious. What is my opponent up to? Right? I mean, you should ask yourself that question really, in every case anyway, but especially when your opponent is making what seems to be such an obvious blunder. So be really, really suspicious. Your opponent is up to no good, I can assure you. And of course, this goes in both directions. We are not after our opponent's best interest, at least not in the game, and they're not really too worried about our best interest either. So when your opponent seems to have made a big mistake, be extremely careful. All right, I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.